So right now we are going to switch over to the State Energy and Climate Priorities panel. This is an opportunity. There is a lot of good and important work happening across state government, both in relation to the Global Warming Solutions Act and our broader climate and energy efforts. And one of the things that the Agency of Natural Resources has done is to, they're working on reorienting, reorganizing in a way to work to, as efficiently and effectively as possible, coordinate the work within a brand new, it has not actually been, Jane will give us the details. I don't believe it's been formally created or announced yet, but the move is towards a climate action office. And the amazing, hardworking, incredible Jane Lozorchak, who has been the director of the Global Warming Solutions Act. I think we should just pause, and I want to invite folks to give a round of applause to Jane. Any of you who have watched a Climate Council meeting, a Climate Council subcommittee meeting in the last year, see the amount of work, of goodwill, of grace under pressure that Jane puts in, coordinating, setting up meetings, there's certainly a team. Marion does amazing work, the whole team at ANR and the Public Service Department and everybody involved in the council. But Jane has held things together and has done your person's work over the last year and a half in standing up and supporting the Climate Council. So I'm really excited to invite her to come up and talk about the future plans for the Climate Action Office within ANR. I think this is important for the whole network to know about in terms of what will be happening there and how to engage. And then also there's really important work happening at the Public Service Department in terms of their renewable and clean electricity policies and program review, which is underway now, and there are opportunities for network members to participate in. And so TJ Poore and Claire McElvany from the Public Service Department will be sharing work with us. And I mentioned Jane. TJ he served as the co-chair of the Science and Data Subcommittee of the Council and is now co-chairing the Cross-Sector Mitigation Subcommittee. Between doing a comprehensive energy plan and a climate action plan and, the amount of work that the Public Service Department does with such a small and dedicated team, it's amazing. So thank you, Jane, TJ, and Claire. Please come on up to tell us more about the Climate Action Office and the policies and program review happening at the Public Service Department.
That was completely undeserving, and I just want to take a moment to say that it's been an amazing privilege to work with many of you, both across state government, across the nonprofit sector, private citizens. It was an amazing collaborative effort to stand up the Climate Action Plan. Nothing short of, I'd just say, a miracle that we did it by December 1st of last year. It's wrought with challenges. It's a work in progress. It is an initial climate action plan acknowledging that. And I really feel beyond honored to stand up here now and be thinking about what's next for the state, right? We have a long way to go, and there's nothing short of the organization and effort of state government to help serve that work that was done in this initial climate action plan. So it's exciting, it's bold, and it's really going to take time for us to be thinking about what that direction looks like. First and foremost, the action in the recommendation in the Climate Action Plan was to stand up a Climate Action Office. We've had the privilege of thinking about that within the Agency of Natural Resources. There's a lot of ways that we could do that. The work of climate and providing climate solutions and strategies is cross-cutting across state government. And we know that that work will not just be within the Agency of Natural Resources. But as we took a direction and led and worked with the governor and the legislature to put this forward, the work of the Global Warming Solutions Act really points to ANR as where the rubber meets the road. Those emissions reductions requirements that Jared speaks to quite elegantly and often and reminds us of, that legally binding hook sits with the Agency of Natural Resources. and as well as numerous other requirements of the GWSA that we still have to meet and still have to stand up. The focus of that work, the work across state government, will sit within ANR, but it will be cross-cutting, collaborative with all of you as it has been and will continue to need to be. So briefly, and I really want to be able to answer questions and let Claire and TJ speak to the ongoing work within PSD also, and because Cara only gave me 5 minutes to speak to this, I just want to sort of speak to how we're going to be doing, what we hope to do over the course of the next few months. This was obligated in this year's budget. It's base funding within the Agency of Natural Resources. It's what we hope to have in place by this legislative session. We've been working since the implementation of this budget, July 1st, to stand this up. We're going to meet this challenge through existing staff within ANR and new positions. So the work that we've been speaking to through Department of Environmental Conservation, work within Forest Parks and Rec, work that is really cross-cutting within our agency will be assimilated into the central office of ANR through program development and coordination. We'll have specialists who work on mitigation, specialists who work on resilience and adaptation, and specialists in the natural and working land sector. That really gets at our climate program coordination, and we're thinking about what are the remaining objectives of the GWSA and what are the staff needed to meet that. We'll be working to hire climate change progress data managers that as we move the greenhouse gas inventory into the central office and work on a timely and expected delivery date on an annual basis so that we have that data in a way that's predictable to speak to our emissions reductions. As we also stand that up and build a data and tracking progress tool, that expertise will all live in the climate office. And think about how we support that ongoing work of the Global Warming Solutions Act and build out the tools necessary to do that. We also know that we are not going to be successful with any of this work without continuing to engage and build upon the work that you all do with communities and citizens and the work that state government needs to do better through community engagement and involvement. We're doing a lot of that. We're testing sort of the brink of what state government is good at and evolving and listening to people how to do better. And we're thinking about how to build capacity in the climate office to think about community engagement long-term with diverse partners, including how we reach more Vermonters, especially frontline and impacted. And I know Carla is here or joining us shortly to speak to the environmental justice legislation. But this is an exciting time in ANR because we're not only standing up a climate action office, we're also standing up an environmental justice office in ANR. And that work will be intimately connected, especially in how we reach and work with Vermonters. Which one? So really briefly, the work of the Climate Action Office really is multi-pronged. And it is sort of, we are hitting the ground running. We are still working really closely to support the council. The Climate Council still has a lot of pieces. We have substantive areas of work that we're still working to address by the end of this year to stand up robust recommendations in the transportation space and around biomass, both looking at biomass electricity generation as well as thinking about how and where we source our wood for that. Those are two substantive areas that were not completed in time for the Climate Action Plan last year, and we're looking to put forward additional recommendations to amend the Climate Action Plan. The staff of ANR, as well as the staff across PSD and beyond, are all working to support that work. We have public engagement that's ongoing. I think of that as a collaboration with the council. That is a priority that the council has said, and we work closely with them to direct the work of state staff and beyond to meet the objectives of the GWSA, as well as think about the Climate Action Plan. As we think about the policies that are needed, I feel like often somebody actually said to me that we're actually the Office of Technical Analysis yesterday of studies, but we are doing a number of studies to serve and advance policy recommendations coming out of the Climate Action Plan. Whether that's the standing up a municipal vulnerability index tool, whether that's a buildings and thermal analysis to further advance the questions in the governor's veto so that we can go back to the legislature with an informed analysis of the outcomes and impacts of the clean heat standard. We're looking at the way we track our emissions. We're looking at supplemental analyses for the emissions inventory, like the life cycle analysis. And we're also thinking about broadly forest carbon and how we track and measure that with respect to our emissions inventory. And finally, and really most exciting, we're trying to pivot from all of this work and think about how we move from planning into implementation. And that is a transition that's ongoing and really will be thought out and really realized in the coming years. But Megan O'Toole and others in DEC are standing up advanced clean cars and advanced clean trucks right now. Our largest really policy recommendation out of the Climate Action Plan to reduce emissions in the transportation sector. We're thinking about tools for municipalities and how we scale the Climate Action Plan to reach municipalities through the development of a Climate Action Toolkit right now. And that's work Marion Wolse is leading in the Climate Action Office as she transitions to lead our Resilience and Adaptation program there. And we're also moving the RGGI program from DEC into the Climate Action Office with the expectation that long-term mitigation policies and strategies will come from the Climate Action Office with respect to ANR. So that's a lot. The transition is ongoing. As I said, we really hope to have all of this work in place and at least a structure and a system within the central office to support all of this by the end of the year. I would have said if you asked me a few months ago, we would have had this in place by September, but government moves slow. But this is really bold and new for us, and ANR is really changing right now the way we organize and think about how we coordinate this work both across the departments and across state government. And we have our first meeting, I should just say, also around an interagency advisory board across state government, because as we said, as I suggested, we cannot do this work without the partners across our other departments, Agency of Transportation, PSD, Buildings and Services, Ag. All of that will take coordination to actually inform the work of the Climate Action Office, as well as think about how we measure and track progress collaboratively going forward. So I look forward to working with all of you to do that, and look forward to answering any questions you have about this really exciting time within state government.
There we go. All right, well, many of you may have astutely noticed I'm only Claire McElveny and not Claire McElveny and TJ Poor. TJ and I made a last-minute decision that in the interest of the time we had, only one of us would speak to the programs or the review of renewable electricity clean programs, but TJ is here. I believe he's standing in the back, and you can still direct your most challenging questions in his direction. But yeah, so I'm here today to talk a little bit about the review of renewable and clean electricity programs and policies that the Department of Public Service began earlier this summer. This is working to begin implementing one of the recommendations that came out of the 2022 Comprehensive Energy Plan, and is consistent with recommendations in the Climate Action Plan that we consider a comprehensive review of the renewable energy standard that we have today and the supporting programs and policies, considering a low or zero carbon standard in addition to 100% renewable energy standard and the supporting programs and policies that would go with it. So to kick off that process in reflection of a lot of what we heard during the last years as we put these two plans together, we issued a request for input that came out in early July and was open through mid-August, where we asked a set of questions in three core areas. One focused on the process itself, how we should actually go about conducting this review in terms of the timeline it may take, the stakeholders that should be at the table as we have these conversations, and also the different types of engagement opportunities that we might have to bring folks to the table to talk about these important policies and programs. My remarks today are going to focus on that set of questions, just in the interest of time and some initial results that we have from the feedback we received. We did also ask questions about sort of core decision-making criteria and key issues that we'll want to consider in this process, and I won't be speaking to those today, but they will be reviewed in a report that we're hoping to issue in the next couple weeks, synthesizing this feedback. So we collected responses through a number of different mediums. You know, we traditionally have collected responses through email and physical mail. We also stood up an online web form midway through this process after receiving some feedback from the Just Transition Subcommittee that might be a more accessible way for a lot of folks to comment on some of these important questions that we were looking to collect feedback on. And we also participated, myself and my colleague Ann Margolis, in a webinar with EAN to talk through this request and answer questions real time, and all the comments from that webinar were actually included in the feedback that we reviewed. Just before getting into results, talking about who we actually heard from, we received input from over 35 towns, individuals representing over 35 towns and organizations in Vermont. We didn't actually ask people to identify their location, so this is just based on voluntarily reported information. We heard from a large majority of our regional planning commissions and a couple town energy committees, and also organizations representing environmental advocates, trade associations, all our distribution utilities, renewable energy developers, and others. I think it's also important for us, and we're reflecting on who we didn't hear from through this process, and we'll hope to sort of build that into our work going forward to make sure that we're making sure everyone's voices are heard as we move forward. So again, I mentioned what I'm going to talk through is the process questions we asked, and again, those were sort of three big questions. What should this process look like in terms of timeline? And we actually issued two sort of illustrative timelines as examples to prompt thoughts on this. One timeline that showed what a process could look like if we were trying to deliver recommendations on renewable energy programs and policies for the upcoming legislative session in 2023, and then a timeline that would give us a little bit more space to have this conversation, looking to deliver recommendations to the 2024 legislative session. And ask folks to comment on, you know, which of these two timelines would provide adequate time and space to engage on these topics. So in terms of some preliminary results, we're still reviewing these, and they're literally hot off the press this week. We tended to hear more support for conducting a longer process with a more robust engagement and technical analyses to support it. We did hear also support for a shorter timeline, acknowledging that we face some really challenging and urgent climate-related goals, and that moving swiftly has benefits as well. And then we heard responses saying maybe we should come out somewhere in the middle and try and balance those two competing objectives in terms of how we structure a timeline moving forward. We also asked what stakeholders should be at the table as we have these conversations, and we had put out some initial prompts for folks that we thought would be valuable to include: our utilities, the renewable energy industry, regional planning commissions, frontline and impacted communities, and others. And we asked folks who's missing from this list, and if you have specific organizations, please let us know so that we can add them to folks that we want to reach out to through this process. And what we heard was a confirmation of a lot of the stakeholders we had on our list, and an expansion of who we were missing. We heard a lot of support for engaging regional and local organizations, particularly planning commissions and others, who our frontline and impacted community should be and who we should make an effort to bring into this process. Lots about community-based organizations such as the housing and finance community, social welfare and support organizations, that our academic institutions had really spanned from high school up through all that, 2-year, 4-year community and technical colleges and the wealth of experience they bring. And so this is just a sample of what we heard, but really showed us sort of the breadth of folks that this topic touches, and thinking about how we can expand our engagement moving forward. And last, we asked a similar question of put forward a number of different types of opportunities and engagement methods that we could use to have this conversation, stemming from interactive workshops and forums, our typical public comment and written comments, polling and attendance at community events. And we asked, which of these would you prefer to engage in, and are there any other opportunities that we might add to consider as we move forward? And as with the stakeholder question, we heard largely confirmation of sort of the suite of tools and engagement methods we put forward seem to resonate with folks, ranging from particularly polling and interactive forums, but down through even like written public comments and public comment forums as appropriate as the process moves forward. And in addition to some alternative methods, encouraging us to think outside the box as we use social media and move into the modern era, which we may not have considered previously. And we didn't specifically ask about in-person or virtual events, but we did hear moderate levels of voluntary support for both those forums. So that is just a quick overview of some of what we've heard through the RFI, but I do think it, in terms of some initial key takeaways about how we might move forward in looking at our renewable energy standard and supporting programs, the weight of the responses we received to this RFI does seem to suggest that a more robust process, support for a more robust process with a longer timeline, which could allow us to bring a more diverse array of voices to the table, while also allowing for some upfront education and capacity building exercise to make sure that we're speaking a common language as we move forward in these considerations. And that using a variety of methods to engage in those conversations could be valuable throughout the process to better understand stakeholders' needs, values, and ideas for how we might move our policies and programs forward to meet our climate and energy goals. So again, just some initial thoughts. We're still working to review all the feedback we received, and I don't have a next steps slide, but I'll just note again, we have a draft synthesis of all the feedback that we received through this process that's undergoing internal review at the department currently, and we hope to publish it publicly for review in the next couple weeks, hopefully end of September, early October. We are using the information we received through that process to develop a public engagement plan, which we hope will lay out sort of a roadmap for where we think this process could go in terms of continuing the conversations on this topic. And yeah, we hope to publish that similarly with the report or shortly thereafter, and hope to continue engaging with everyone in this conversation as we move forward. So I'll stop there with time, and yeah, happy to take questions.
So with apologies for putting you on the spot, Jane, but I am going to follow the will of the group here in terms of what is most popular on Slido. The question that is at the top right now is the clean heat standard was vetoed by the governor, even though the Senate changed it to satisfy his objection. Does the Agency of Natural Resources have the governor's backing to meet the climate action requirements? Sorry, I wasn't really close enough.
That is definitely an on-the-spot question. Yeah. So if we're speaking broadly, I will say that the governor has been really supportive of us moving forward to align the work of the agency to advance the work of the Global Warming Solutions Act. And speaking specifically to the clean heat standard, I do hope in advance that we are putting forward, we've been working closely with the Building and Thermal Task Group of the Cross-Sector Mitigation Subcommittee. We have a really robust buildings and thermal emissions RFP that we plan to post tomorrow, if everything goes well, that we've been working collaboratively on to make it revisions and edits to hopefully answer the questions that were put forward in the governor's veto, as well as go a bit further to really have a comprehensive analysis and understanding to the best of our ability for this legislative session, or somewhat through, our hope is to have preliminary results as we move through this legislative session, so that we can have a more informed data conversation through the results of that study. So yes, we have the support to continue to advance the policies and work, I think, necessary to move forward with the climate action plan.
So the next question is from Representative Becca White, and that is, how can the legislature guarantee that this office, the Climate Action Office, is successful, and what accountability is there?
Yes, well, so one of the major requirements of the Global Warming Solutions Act is to stand up the Measuring and Tracking Progress tool. Representative White, actually through conversations with House Transportation, was trying to do they were trying to put forward a very similar tracking tool independent of the requirements that we have and continue to speak to need to do as a result of the GWSA. So what folks probably know is that the greenhouse gas inventory is a very coarse, in many sectors, coarse look at the emissions reductions and the data that goes into that. And what we're hoping to do through the Measuring and Tracking Progress tool is actually stand up and review the specific, more fine-grained analysis through the policies and targets that we plan to put on the ground that we expect will yield emissions reduction benefits. And by doing that, we'll be able to see where we're able to make progress and where we're lacking. So I really think that the Measuring and Tracking Progress tool over time will be the sort of gold standard of where are we successful in helping to drive down emissions and where do we need to do more. And that it will be a work in progress, and I expect that not to be stood up for more than a year and a half still.
Thanks, Jamie. So the next two questions are about communities and our regions across the state, and I think could be answered by either or both of you. But the first one is that a lot is being asked of local town staff, volunteers, and champions who are already over capacity. In the work that you're talking about, will you be coordinating with energy committees, regional planning commissions, and nonprofit organizations? And can you maybe just say a little bit more about what you are planning and anticipate that looks like?
Go first. Sure.
Making sure everyone can hear me, let me know if not. But that's definitely something we're thinking about through our renewable energy program review. As I mentioned in the slides, we did hear quite a bit of support for engaging with the regions and municipalities. We're in the initial phases of discussing with some of the regional planning commissions what that might look like, acutely aware of the capacity constraints that they face as well as us, and so hoping not to overburden anyone more than they already are, but also looking, especially in the energy space, to take advantage of the local and regional knowledge that has been accumulated as through the Act 174 planning process, where all of our regions and many of our towns have gone through really comprehensive energy planning efforts. So I'll pause there and hand it over to Jane, but it's definitely something we're thinking about and hoping to work with them in a respectful way.
A requirement of the Global Warming Solutions Act is the standing up of a climate action toolkit. It's targeted specifically at municipalities. It's been a focus of staff within the Agency of Natural Resources with support from subcommittee members and counselors across the Rural Resilience and Adaptation Subcommittee, as well as Science and Data and Just Transitions. Over the course of the last 6 months, the idea is to really think about how to stand up and provide both the tools and additional resources and capacity to municipalities to leverage climate action planning, as well as funding and directive to actually put projects on the ground. We hope to launch that by the end of the year, as well as lift up and put forward the development of the Municipal Vulnerability Index, which is specific town-level mapping tool to help towns prioritize where to put projects on the ground. That will be done this spring, and in putting forward our budget and thinking about future resources needed, we're looking to ask for additional resources for next year to actually invest in RPCs and others to actually help provide resources and objectives to towns to actually use and get informed and apply the Municipal Vulnerability Index to climate planning going forward. So it's been a theme. It was a theme in the Rural Resilience and Adaptation Subcommittee broadly that we are asking a lot of our municipalities, and that we need to be thinking front and center about how we build capacity across those towns to meet what the demands that we're asking of them.
So your answer goes right into the next question that's at the top right now, which is, can you just say a little bit more about, either of you, because I know you both know about this, what might be included in the Climate Action Toolkit for communities?
Are you on that one? Okay. So the Climate Action Toolkit specifically, it speaks to rural resilience. It was actually an obligation in the GWSA that the Rural Resilience and Adaptation, one of the 5 subcommittees who helped stand up the climate plan, was to put that forward. Marion Woltz has been helping lead that effort within our agency. And while it was specific to to resilience and adaptation strategies, it was clear to us as we were moving it forward that it's integral to pull in mitigation strategies. So it's really a comprehensive toolkit across climate action planning that speaks to all of the sort of necessary buckets of work that need to happen, as well as equity and climate planning in those communities. It's a web-based tool that goes farther, as well as thinking about how to put forward and project case studies and best management practices for communities to learn by example and hopefully bring capacity and resources to bear. So it's really a web-based tool that tries to sort of bring down and scale down to community levels the strategies and actions that are in the Climate Action Plan.
Thanks, Jane. So I'm seeing that we are at time, and to stay on schedule, I want to invite folks, if you had a question that did not get answered, I think Jane and Claire are going to be here for most, if not all, of the day. And there's lots of other folks engaged in this work, so hopefully those conversations will continue throughout the day. But we want to preserve these full break times so that everybody can have lots of time to connect and talk. So the next 10 minutes.